Captured by the Allies and sent across the Atlantic, German soldiers expected harsh treatment, brutal conditions, maybe worse. They had heard stories of prisoner camps, dark, cold, places where the enemy showed no mercy, but nothing could have prepared them for their first day in America. Spring, 1944. Over 400,000 German prisoners of war would eventually pass through America's borders, more than most people realize. They came in waves. Afrika Korps, veterans from North Africa, infantrymen from the Italian campaign, sailors plucked from sunken U-boats. As their trains rolled past small American towns, children waving from porches, farmers pausing in their fields, the prisoners pressed against the windows, confused. Where were the bombed-out buildings? The rubble? The desperation they'd seen across war-torn Europe? When the gates opened at camps like Camp Concordia in Kansas or Camp Hearn in Texas, what they saw stopped them cold. Clean barracks, organized grounds, no barbed wire scars on the landscape, no guards screaming orders. One prisoner would later write, "We thought life here would be like prison, but we were about to discover a very different world." The first shock came at mealtime. The prisoners lined up, uncertain, remembering the watery soups and stale bread of European camps. Then the American cooks began filling their trays. White bread. Actual white bread. Soft and fresh. Butter, potatoes, meat that didn't come from a tin, canned fruit, coffee that smelled like coffee. Many of them simply stared. For months, even years. Some of these men had survived on rations so meager they could count every calorie. German civilians back home were starving. Their own army had reduced rations 3 times in 2 years. And here, in an enemy country, they were being served meals that exceeded what they'd eaten as free men before the war. Private Georg Gärtner later recalled, "I could not believe it. We had been told Americans were suffering, starving, but they fed us like guests." The barracks told the same impossible story. Wooden buildings with real roofs, no leaks. Mattresses, not straw pallets, actual mattresses. Blankets issued to each man. Showers with hot water. Some camps even had heat in winter. They had expected concrete floors and cold corners. Instead, they found themselves housed better than some American soldiers in basic training. By day, they worked. The Geneva Convention required it prisoners could be assigned labor, and America needed hands. With millions of men overseas fighting, farms across the heartland faced a labor crisis. So the POWs were put to work, harvesting cotton in Arkansas, picking fruit in California, processing sugar beets in Colorado, cutting lumber in Minnesota. But something strange happened in those fields. Instead of harsh orders and bayonets, they received instructions clear, professional, respectful. American farmers, many themselves immigrants or sons of immigrants, saw these young men and recognized something familiar. Hard workers, far from home. Sometimes, a farmer would nod thanks after a long day. Sometimes, there would be a shared cigarette during breaks, a joke translated through broken English and hand gestures. Sergeant Reinhold Pabel, who worked on a Nebraska farm, remembered, "The American farmer treated us not as prisoners, but as hired help. When we finished the harvest, he shook our hands." It was surreal. 6 months earlier, they'd been shooting at American soldiers. Now, they were sitting in American kitchens, drinking American coffee, talking about soil conditions and rainfall. And then there were the evenings. After work, the camps came alive in ways the prisoners never imagined. Soccer matches on grassy fields, volleyball nets strung between posts, card games in the barracks. Some camps had libraries, actual libraries with German books shipped in by the Red Cross. At Camp Concordia, prisoners built a theater and staged productions of German plays. At Camp Ruston in Louisiana, they formed orchestras, gave concerts. The Americans provided instruments, paint, lumber for sets. They made art. They studied some camps, offered courses in English, mathematics, agriculture. They read newspapers, debated politics, argued about Germany's future. For the first time in years, they could think beyond survival. They watched American movies, Chaplin comedies, westerns, newsreels showing the war from the other side. And slowly, carefully, some began to question what they'd been told about America, about the enemy. Letters home became elaborate affairs pages long, describing this strange land where prisoners ate white bread and played soccer, where guards sometimes shared cigarettes and farmers said thank you. Many of those letters never mentioned the word prison at all. Yet, life in America was not without rules. Escape attempts, though rare, were punished. Barbed wire still enclosed the camps. Watchtowers still stood at corners. Guards still counted heads at roll call. Freedom, real freedom, remained beyond the fence. But within those boundaries, something unexpected was growing. Not friendship. Exactly how could there be friendship across such a divide? But something quieter. Recognition. The slow realization that the men on the other side of the wire were not so different after all. For these German soldiers, the first day in America shattered expectations. They had arrived braced for punishment, hardship, perhaps brutality. What they discovered was not freedom. That remained an ocean and a war away. But they found something equally powerful, something many had forgotten existed. Respect, humanity, a glimpse of a world far different from the one they had known. The treatment of German POWs in America stands as one of the war's quieter stories. While concentration camps operated in Europe, while millions suffered and died, these prisoners, enemy soldiers, men who had fought for a regime of unspeakable evil, ate well, worked under decent conditions, and were treated according to international law. It wasn't mercy, it was adherence to the Geneva Convention. But in that adherence, in those daily acts of basic human decency, something transformed. After the war ended, when the prisoners returned to a devastated Germany, many carried with them memories that would shape the rest of their lives. Some returned to America legally, became citizens, started families. Others stayed in Germany but spoke of their time as POWs with something unexpected: gratitude. Georg Gärtner, who eventually settled in California, said, "My first day in America, I thought I had entered a dream. Years later, I realized I had entered my future. The POW camps are gone now, torn down, repurposed, covered by strip malls and subdivisions. But in small museum archives across the heartland, you can still find evidence. Photographs of young men in Wehrmacht uniforms playing baseball in Kansas, building furniture in Texas, harvesting wheat in Nebraska. You can find letters, carefully preserved, describing meals and movies and small kindnesses that seemed impossible in a world at war. There's a question history asks us, quietly, through stories like these. How do we treat those we have every right to hate? In 1944, America answered that question not with speeches or proclamations, but with mattresses and meals, with work and wages, with the simple, radical act of seeing the enemy as human. For German soldiers stepping off trains onto American soil, expecting the worst, and finding something completely different, that first day became a turning point. Not just in their war, but in their understanding of what the world could be. They came as prisoners. Many left as witnesses to a different possibility, a world where humanity could survive even the worst of wars. Between 1942 and 1946, over 400,000 German POWs were held in camps across the United States. Their treatment set a standard for prisoner rights that would influence international law for decades to come.